Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. My name is Kojo Baffoe. I'm a writer, storyteller, content strategist, and author of the book Listen to Your Footsteps, a collection of essays, reflections, and poems exploring fatherhood, identity, art, culture, life, and kind of everything in between. So this podcast is an extension of that. So my guest today is Donovan Goliath, who for a very long time has been known as the funny guy, as a comedian. For one, I am very grateful that the world is finally starting to see all the dimensions of him that I've known about. So, I mean, obviously, Donovan is a friend, but welcome.
Thank you.
Now that we've got the formal stuff down.
No, that was very formal. I was like, yo, this man is about to break into like a serious CV, go through accolades.
Trying to find all of that stuff so it's very interesting when one does a search for you online, right? Because it's so focused around the comedy. Because so in a way that I was discovered via, let's call it magazine, you were discovered via comedy.
Correct.
It's like you'd had an entire life before that. Like you've done things with your life, and then you have this one thing that ends up literally overshadowing everything else. I still don't know how I feel about it. How do you feel about it?
You know what's interesting is when the lockdown happened last year, I'm not sure when this podcast comes out, so I'll say when the lockdown happened in 2020, obviously being an entertainer, we were, that was it, like everything came to a halt. We had to shut our comedy club down. We weren't going to be on stage performing for a very long time. And I'm not the kind of person to sit around and do nothing. I always have to be busy making something. And it kind of forced me to tap into my other skills. I guess the skills that I suppressed when comedy took over, that, you mentioned it earlier on, that about. It forced me to dig quite deep and go back to what I know and what I'm really about. And start creating stuff and I guess telling stories, with that kind of stuff. So pulling from my advertising background, pulling from my design background, adding a little bit of comedy into it, and then just creating stuff. There was no real. I'm not going to say we created ads or we created skits. We just created things that we found entertaining. I say we. It was my wife and I.
Look at you get to say that.
Look, I know, and I'm trying to say it as much as possible now because I am newly married. For those of you who don't know, I keep throwing it in so I get used to it. No, this thing of saying my partner, my girlfriend, it doesn't sound right anymore. But going back to your question, like I felt, this is going to sound so weird, but I felt free. I was like, yeah, man, I'm glad people are getting to see a different side of me and that they're not just put me in a box, because like we've had many conversations about this where it kind of frustrated me that I actually put myself in this box and kind of pushed everything aside. I did. Yeah. So
let's take a step back. What did you want to be when you grew up? This is one of my favorite questions.
That is such a difficult question. I've always been an artistic kid, right? I've always been able to draw since a very young age. I mean, I remember my best friend in Sub A, Libo Mahlati. He was another guy who could draw. So we would compete. We were the people who were competing, in class, trying to draw Ninja Turtles or whatever was popping at the time. But he was a little bit better than I was. I can admit it now. This is the first time I've ever said it. He went on to become an architect and an illustrator, and he's incredible. He's really amazing. And, it was just a hobby. And I would just draw and I would cut pictures out of magazines and, sort of almost recreate the entire scene and recreate a whole new magazine. Art directing, basically. Before I became an artist, I was basically art directing. And I found this stuff very interesting. And I was very much inspired by, head cut posters. Like barbershops, they draw the side profile of all these. And I was just so blown away that you could go in there and just point at a picture and then that's what you're going to get based off of a picture, or
Depending
you go to
on the talent of the barber.
well, there we go. I'm yet to figure out what a flying dog haircut is, because that was very popular in Tata. I don't know if that's a big thing around South Africa. There was one called Flying Dog.
Lesotho, you never had a flying dog.
So there was that. The other thing I was inspired by was outside of spaza shops, there would always be a drawing of a Coke can, what looked like a burger, and maybe a pack of cigarettes. Just those three things just gives you an idea of what you can expect there. That just based off of a symbol or a picture, that this is what this place is. And I didn't understand at the time that was communication design, essentially, and growing up when I did, I guess speaking to your parents about graphic design, or I want to be a fine artist, that was out of the question. There was nobody to even have that conversation with, especially in Mthatha. Like I couldn't just go to somebody and say, hey man, how can I harness this and turn it into something else? That wasn't an option. So I was in matric, and I still had no idea what I was going to do. What I definitely wasn't going to do was anything involving numbers, so no accounting, none of that stuff. I was terrible at maths, still bad at it. Nothing in the medical field, no engineering, like the list goes on and on and on. None of those things appealed to me. What did appeal to me?
The list of things that are often, when you come from those kind of environments, the only options. Like the fact that you have engineering means you're actually going a little bit outside of the teacher, nurse, doctor, lawyer.
Yes.
It's very limited.
Yes. No, absolutely. And what did make me happy, because from about like 13 or 14, I was in a rap group as well. I used to love listening to rap music. I had a lot of older friends who got me onto rap music. So in a rap group, and I thought I'd be a musician. Like I was like, we Coca-Cola came around to our local shopping mall, Circus Triangle, one day, and they had a talent competition. And my rap partner at the time, Miguel, aka Peeps the Villain, we happened to be at Circus Triangle.
Okay, I don't know, like before you there's Peeps the Villain and there's who?
Acid Rain.
Oh, wow.
I was Acid Rain. That was it. So, when we'd record like our mixtapes, I found like Thunder from some song, and I just like cut that bit up, and every time, just before my verse started, it would always start with like a boom, and then I'd come in. So they came through, had a talent competition, and then we carried around a backpack with our like beats. These were instrumentals that we just like stole from, at the time you get CD singles, and we'd always just record instrumentals on one tape, and we handed that to the DJ there, and we performed like 3 songs, and they loved it. They gave us these like Sprite basketball shirts, which were oversized. They gave us drinks, and this guy was like, yo, we're taking you guys on a tour, we're taking you guys to Joburg. I was like, there it is, man. Right. This is it. It's done. I'm a rapper. And all I wanted to do, to be honest with you, was be on Jam Alley. At the time, I was like, send me to Jam Alley, let me do the freestyle on Jam Alley. I'm gonna do a prepared song, let me do my own song, and then it's over. That's all I wanted. And they never called, they never came back. It was the last time they did the talent shows. That was it. So Outbreak, our group, eventually broke up, because Miguel was a year ahead of me. So he finished matric. I was still in standard 9, and he left Mthatha, and that was the end of our rap group. So now I'm like, now what? And I still had no idea what to do. Then we got a substitute teacher at my school, Zingisa. His name was Jason Crane, white guy, at Zingisa Comprehensive High School, which was very interesting, And Jason, he then decided to start art as an extracurricular activity, because he had studied in East London, he studied art. And I don't give Jason Crane enough props for getting me out and getting me to do what I do right now. And I obviously joined the, art class at Zingisa. There were a couple of us in there, and I was pretty good at it. And eventually, I chatted to him about this thing, going, hey man, could one make money from this thing? And he goes, yeah, let me show you. So we go onto the internet and we look at PE Technikon. And it was the East London campus, because that one was closer to Mthatha, right? The East London campus at PE Technikon. And he goes, what about graphic design? I'm like, what are you even saying to me right now? So he says, no, after school, stick around and let's go through some portfolios. So we start going through all these design portfolios. Yo, Brian, my mind is blown away. I'm like, so people are making this and people are getting paid to do this kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, this is what you can study. And that was it. And I went to my parents and I explained this to them. And, fortunately, somehow they trusted and believed in me, because even they were like, what are you saying to us? We've never heard of this thing before. And I went ahead and did it.
I mean, it's amazing the power of, and I guess we don't see, we don't recognize it enough, or we take it for granted. I mean, I grew up with a lot more privilege and a lot more access, right? But one never realizes the power of that, the power of just the understanding that this is what's available. And how that in its own way can truly transform spaces. And it could be a small thing, a chance meeting, a random conversation that actually changes the trajectory of somebody's life. Absolutely.
So you know what I did? Because that thing stuck with me a lot, and it still does to this day. Like, I'm a hype man for a lot of young creatives out there. I'm really trying to make as much noise as possible and put people on as much as I can. Doesn't matter what field you're in, because we don't respect creative talent in South Africa. It's still considered a hobby. It always takes me back to when I was in Mthatha, where, and I should have mentioned this earlier on. I'll never forget a family friend. I was in matric, and he came to the house one day for something, and he asked, so, what are you going to go and study? So I said, I'm going to study graphic design. Yo, man, this guy burst out laughing in my face. He actually grabbed me and held me, and he just, when somebody just this is the funniest thing I've heard all day. Then he calls my dad, Colin, come here, man, come here. That condescending kind of let me hold you so you don't go away. So he's holding me and he goes, listen, man, I'm going to need you to change this lighty's mind here today, because in 5 years' time, your son is going to be printing Mickey Mouse T-shirts. That's what he said, verbatim, and selling them at a flea market. That's what he wants to study. Do you want your son to do that? So my dad, was like, hey, man, he felt a bit offended, going, you can't just say this and humiliate him, So there was a bit of a thing there. But it always stuck with me. And maybe, I don't know, secretly in my mind, I always told myself, I'm going to prove this guy wrong. You took me, he pulled me all the way down, but you're going to be printing Mickey Mouse T-shirts and selling them at flea markets. That's the goal.
Well, if you look now, if you look at the T-shirts that we buy,
this is true. So maybe he was right. He was
a Mickey Mouse out there.
Yeah, he was a philosopher, I guess. So going back to what you were saying about access and being able to chat to people, I made it a point when I moved to Joburg eventually. I got my degree in art and design, moved to Joburg, worked at a big agency, an ad agency. I would try and go back once or twice a year back to my Technikon in PE and just have free workshops with the students, to get them out of, I guess, small town mode. Mary Duker, my design lecturer at the time, also she's one of the people who honestly got me where I am today. That's straight up facts, because she told me, I will not allow you to work in PE. There is something in you that is a lot bigger than a job title. There are a lot of stories that you need to tell, and you're not going to be able to do them here. So I'm not going to give you a reference if you ask me for a reference to go and work at one of the small agencies in PE. I refuse to, because I want you to go, and I need you to be afraid. And I appreciated that so much. So I would always go back and do the same for a lot of the young people there. You know what the best feeling in the world is? when you go and do one of those workshops and you tell them it's possible, man. When you come from a small town, you believe that anybody in like a Joburg, a Cape Town, or even a Durban is better than you.
Yeah.
Far more talented because they've got a lot more access and exposed to a lot more things. It sticks with you. And I was that person as well. So I'd always go back and try and sort of unlearn or force them to unlearn that, using Loiso Kola's that's his word. Like every time I hear the word unlearn, I always think of Loiso Kola, and I love it so much, the way he frames it. And then you get an email like a year later going, "Hey man, what's up? Apologies for dropping this mail. I got your email address from Mary Duker. I just wanted to say thank you for that talk. Like, it really stuck with me." And in my mind, I always thought that this is where I'd end up. This is how my life is going to pan out, because I was just too afraid to take the next step. But after what you said, or after whatever you showed us, like you put me on a different path, and I'm actually either moving overseas, or I'm also coming to Joburg now, or I started doing this and doing that. And I just want to say thanks. You changed my life. Bruh, that thing, like nothing will fulfill you completely when you realize that you've put somebody on. And you've done something for somebody who can never repay you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, what a thing.
Would you say that, I mean, just like I'm listening to you talk, and I have the benefit of kind of us having had multiple conversations. But so, for example, you're coming to Joburg, getting out of that, so having been told that I'm not going to let you get comfortable. If you're trying to be comfortable, I won't support you. And then you coming to Joburg, right? And then building your career within the agency space, but then deciding to jump into comedy. And it feels like there's a thread that runs where you are pushed to step outside of your comfort zone. So decisions like I am going to leave what for many people is a career. And you were well on your way on that particular kind of track and that particular thread to go, actually, do you know what? I'm going to try and start to build this thing.
Yeah. I think last year, or when the lockdown happened, I had some time to think about this, because, during that time, obviously I'd sit and go, well, that's it. That's the end of comedy. That's it. What now? And it made me realize that I'm the kind of person who I can't do one thing for a very long time. So I did the rap thing, and then it ended, and I was like, cool, it's done. And then just before, or in my first year of studying, I would always come back to Mthatha, and my Catholic priest, Father Fisher, would commission me to do religious oil paintings for him. And I'd never even done fine art before. And I'm sure you've seen these before. I've shown them to you. And that was such an interesting challenge for me, because when he told me what I needed to do, I was like, yeah, cool. And in my mind, I was expecting, I'm going to be doing like an A3 size canvas. And this guy rocked up with a baki. I'll never forget. It was an old Isuzu with a masonite board, like 2 meters by 1.5. And he's like, here's the canvas. I said, whoa, what is this now? This is ridiculous. I've never painted before. And he goes, no, but you can. I can see that you're excited about this, and I've seen your drawing skills. This is a good challenge for you. Do you want to take it on? And that's what I did, And when I realized that I loved this thing, and apart from just having the skill to be able to do it, I think I was obsessed with proving myself wrong and going, no, man, I'm going to do everything I can to make this as perfect as possible. So I'm learning as I'm painting. I've never worked with oil paints before. I don't understand how this medium works. It's very different to acrylic. It's very different to a pencil crayon. So I'm learning as I'm going along, but I'm getting so into it. I'll never forget, there was a day, I think for about 3 hours, I spent painting just an eye, because I was so into it. I was too deep into it that I didn't take a step back and go, yes, this thing is, it's totally out. It's all wrong. The perspective is totally out here, because I was so deep and so focused. But for me, that painting experience was I think that's the last time I was ever in a complete state of flow where I just immersed myself in it, because I discovered a talent that I didn't know I had. I didn't know that I could do this at all, and I didn't really believe I could do it, but it was a nice challenge. Then the painting thing, I stopped doing that, and then went into graphic design, which was a lot more digital. And even that, I'd never used a computer to design stuff before, so we had to learn that way of doing things. And I discovered, I guess, minimalism. Going to the library, and this is the interesting thing when people speak about the internet. I always say the internet is a gift and a curse, because the era I studied, I was like the last generation, I guess, that we didn't have the internet, but we would still have to go to the library to search for stuff. And the beautiful thing about going to libraries is that you almost need to know what you're going there to look for.
Yeah.
It's very specific. The internet, you put a word in and you get cast a million options, and you get thrown down a rabbit hole, and your intention, whatever you were searching for, it's not laser focused. You've like kind of veered off a little bit, and you don't really understand what you're doing. But I would force myself to learn and understand, this medium as much as possible. One, because I didn't want to waste my parents' money, and I don't like losing, so I wanted to be the best at this thing. And I found an illustrator called Guy Ballou, who does, visual puns, like very, very simple. It's so minimalistic, and it spoke to me, and that, I guess, that style started moving into the way I design stuff. I love the idea of minimalism, taking as much out as possible, but still making something speak as loudly as possible. Left art and design and went into advertising, which I didn't study. I studied to be a designer, not an art director, ad guy. And when I applied for my job, I don't even know if we've even spoken about this. I just sent a CV through and a portfolio. Here's not even a CV, just a portfolio. Here we go. Here's a basic description of who I am. And my creative director, Julian Watt, at the time, he calls me back the next day saying, "Hey man, what's up? We just got your work. I just want to have a conversation with you very quickly. So your name's Donovan David Goliath. You're from Mthatha. I see here you speak Xhosa. Tell me about this. This is very weird. This whole thing that you're speaking about here. This doesn't make sense. You're a very interesting person to me, and I like your work." So we chat. He goes, "Can you come in for an interview?" I go, "No, I can't. I'm in PE and I'm still studying and I can't afford to." So he goes, "Okay, give me a week." Gives me a week. Then a week later, he calls me. He goes, "There's something about you I like. Do you want to come and work with us?" Now, I was lucky at the time. I'd won a trip to Design Indaba because I wrote a motivation on why I should be chosen to go to Design Indaba in my fourth year. And I got to see the owner of the company I worked for, my boss at the time, Mike Shalit, speak at Design Indaba, and blew me away. I loved how this guy, I love how he thought, man. It was just everything. He's like, nothing is impossible. His favorite phrase was, "The barn's burnt down, but now we can see the stars." And that's how he lived his life. And that's how if you throw a brief at him and you say, "Oh, we can't do this for that amount of money," he goes, "What are you talking about? This is an excellent opportunity," and always fired up. And I really tried to hold on to that as much as possible. And fast forward, Julian eventually said, "I like you. I think you're going to fit in here with us. I'm going to fax a contract through to you. Sign it. Join us when you're done studying." What? Okay. And then I'd finished my fourth year, and I think my contract, I was supposed to start in Feb, if I'm not mistaken. And then I drove up to Joburg in my little Golf, no aircon, bags, portfolio, paint brushes in case somebody wants to commission me to do a painting, and walked into my... Got to the office, walked in, met Julian Watt for the first time. We'd only ever spoken on the phone, and he was like, "Welcome. We're going to seat you over here. Here's your first brief." And the first brief was a promo for the Kanye West concert, when Kanye West came here for the first time. And he's like, "Here, you got to do this promo for 5FM. I'm like, "What is a promo? What are you saying to me? What do I have to do?" And they thought I was joking, but I'm like, I didn't study this. I didn't study advertising, like, give me the give me the card and like, give me the graphics for the promo, and then that's what I'll do for you. No, this guy was like, you got to get some clips of Kanye West, put it together. You got to do the voiceover. You got to do this. You got to you got to design the merch. Like, I was sitting there with the production guy, and we're ordering, those glasses he had with the lines.
Yeah.
We're ordering, I think it was like 100,000 of them from China. And I'm like, what is happening? How is this the job I'm in? And now I realize that, oh shucks, I'm forced to learn something completely different here. I'm in advertising. This is not what I was expecting. I was expecting to design like letterheads and posters. No, none of that stuff. You're going in. So I work in advertising for 6 years, and I think it was on like year 4 or 5 I start feeling like, man, something's missing here. I'm on a bit of a conveyor belt. Like I feel like I'm churning the same things out over and over, and I'm not really expressing my creativity. Then I go and watch a comedy show, the first stand-up show I've ever watched in my life, in 2010. And I saw these guys on stage. Who was it? Ndumiso Lindy, John Flismus, Toles Mo, and somebody else. Like, these guys are just telling stories about their life, and this audience is hanging on to every word, and it's hilarious, and it's creative, and it's funny. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I need to try that. So I write a set. 5 minutes. I call the Underground in Melville. Hi there. I want to do 5 minutes. Like, cool. We've only got a space in November. This is 2 months later. So I'm practicing my set, going, just trying. I don't understand comedy. I'm not even watching comedy. I'm just like, based on what I saw, I'm like, oh, that's the vibe. Let me try and take what I saw and like take that energy and put it down on this piece of paper. Did it, and it worked out. Then I got booked by David Kibuka. That was on a Sunday night to come and perform on a Monday. No, by a guy called Grant Wilson on the Monday. David Kibuka sees me there. He's like, hey, we got this gig on Tuesday. Come through. So now I've got like 3 gigs lined up. I perform. And I think on the 4th gig that week, I go, oh yeah, this is it, man. This is what I want to do. I like being afraid again. I like this idea. It goes back to the painting thing, where something I'd never done before, I immerse myself into it. I'm still able to tell stories. I'm still able to come up with crazy ideas, and people are responding immediately. I like this. And then that was the decision. I go, that's it, man. That's the end of advertising. This is the thing I'm going into now. Damn. It was a very long way around to get to.
But here's an interesting thing, all right? So how do you then navigate this drive to feel uncomfortable and feel challenged again and feel excited again?
Yes.
At a time when, which is what lockdown forced you to do, which is to actually embrace all of them. Right? Because now it feels like finally there's a culmination of literally all of those different things along the way.
Yes.
You're applying that to things today.
Yes.
So you can't leave one behind now. It's literally you need to be able to tap into each one of them.
Yes. And I think that's the exciting part, is always finding a way to check every one of those boxes. Now, the challenge I give myself there is I make sure that I do everything with the least amount of equipment possible. So I shoot everything on my phone, and I edit in iMovie. And I use ViscoCam, for example, to edit. People look at the stuff sometimes and, yo, man, what are you using? Do you have a studio at your place? No, it's all very basic.
And I hate you for that, right? Because I have all the same things. all the same things, like the exact same things that you have, and I'm like, I don't know. Let me phone Donovan.
And that's the interesting challenge for me, because I think I like the idea of being able to push a tool that all of us have to the next level. Like, how far can I push this thing? And I think it comes from, like I said, when I was studying, we still processed film We didn't. Digital cameras came at the end of my fourth year. I didn't even use a digital camera. In fact, they still had the ones with the stiffy discs on the side. You could take like 3 pics, and then you got to take it out and put another one in. So we did everything manually. Even my first 2 years before being introduced to the computer, to the MacBook or to the Apple Mac, we had to draw layouts. So you find a letter set book with whatever font you need, and then you got to trace everything. It was so manual, it was so hard, it was so rigid, but you learn to appreciate the art of it. And I think this decision to try and shoot everything made like just on a phone using basic software, I guess, is reminiscent of that. I'm always just like, I need to know what the picture is going to look like before I hit click, and not shoot 100 pictures, throw it into ViscoCam or whatever preset app and hope for the best. I always go, when I was still shooting on film, I've got like, you buy a spool with like 24 shots 24, on. Yeah. You've got 24 chances to make it happen. But because we had to buy everything and buy the paper that we were printing it on, everything has to work. You can't just go, 1 or 2 can be. No, 1 or 2 can't be rubbish. I'm working on a very tight budget here. Everything has to be good, So I told myself when I left advertising, and I had a workshop with an ad agency once during lockdown, because they wanted to know how you're able to churn so much work out with basic hardware, basic software. And I said, I think sometimes especially when you're a creative in an ad agency, you get very comfortable passing the job on to somebody else. So as an art director, you'll go, here's the shot, we'll give it to whatever photographer, they can sort it out, they'll figure out the technicalities, even if it seems impossible, And then I would hear things in advertising where a copywriter would say, no, I don't mount work because I'm not an art director. And I'd be like, so you can't pick up a blade and a ruler and cut a piece of paper and just stick it down. I found people were boxing. I just write words, bro. I don't do anything else. Same with art directors. I don't write, man. I can't sit in a radio recording. I can't write a headline. I've got no business there. And it bothered me so much. I'm like, but you have no business calling yourself a creative then. If you just, you put yourself in one box. If you're calling yourself a creative, you should find everything inspiring and you should be able to immerse yourself in everything. And then I said, we rely too much on gadgets, on tech, on all of these things to do the work for us. But when you're given an iPhone, how far can you stretch it? Because it has the capability to do everything. We brag about, this thing it's got 3 cameras, it can shoot in 4K, it can do this, it can do that. And then when it's time to do it, people go, no, we can't. But like you brag that I bought it because it's got all these things. And I go, no, man, let's use these things, because you also have it on you all the time, so you've got no excuse then not to find interesting moments and, either to take beautiful pictures or shoot video. And going back to what you were saying, I think that's the motivation for me now is I don't make excuses to not make, I guess, art and tell stories, because I have access to the internet. I have the hardware to be able to do it. I have the software on hand, even on my phone, to be able to put it together quickly and share, as much as I can.
Listen to Your Footsteps is a book that I've written, which is a collection of essays and reflections and some poetry around fatherhood, motherhood, identity, and just general social issues. And the guests on this show are a range of primarily Africans across sectors. You're listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast with myself, Kojo Baffoe. What's your creative process now? I mean, you've touched on it a little bit, but so for example, particularly during lockdown, because I think for the world you felt very prolific. That's because people don't know that you have like your sleeper Instagram account for pictures, and you have this and you have that. But in terms of, okay, here's the spark of the idea. From that spark to actual let's call it execution of it. What's that process for you?
I'm very old school. If I get the idea, and it often happens not when I'm sitting and brainstorming, in the shower, it's just before I wake up or just before I fall asleep, in the car, and I jot it down quickly in my notes app. Then when I'm just before I execute, I have to sit down with pen and paper and draw it out. So any sketch that we do, even if it's just a 15-second sketch, I still storyboard, because once again, it goes back to that thing of I need to know what it's going to look like in my head before I hit record. I don't want to just shoot 200 clips and I'm only going to use 2. This has to be done in a very, very specific way in a very short amount of time. So I'm not wasting time. So I storyboard. I write whatever whatever we're going to be saying. I even put little time markers next to it. So this has to be 3 seconds. This has to be 4 seconds. But it comes from working in above the line advertising. It's very strict. It's very specific. If you get briefed on something that's 30 seconds, you don't go over. You can't go under. It lands on 30 seconds. So you're drilled into making sure that thing works. It's so on point. I'll start off with an idea, and I often go through about 10 different versions of it before settling on the one. And then, set up, go ahead, shoot, immediately go into edit. Because if I shoot and let it sit, the narrative of whatever I'm going to edit starts changing. I need to be in that moment still. Whatever I've storyboarded, I have to stick to that. Edit immediately. So the stuff we did in lockdown, the posters, the Chanel, the fashion-inspired posters we did, from concept to shooting, editing, posting, nothing over 45 minutes.
Wow.
Some of them took 20 minutes. Shoot, edit, post, go, because I know what I need to do, and my hack though, my cheat code was, okay, so I'm shooting something here for Levi's. Let me go and find Levi's ads and get a sense of what the style is, the shooting style. What is the feel people get when they see a Levi's ad? Because a Levi's ad looks different to a Chanel ad, looks different to a Diesel ad, for example. They all have a tone. So I go, oh, that's sort of the tone. Let me mimic that tone. Let me get as close to that tone as possible. So whatever I put out doesn't need to be explained, Then I put it on an infinity curve background, which I shot, because we shot that on a phone, just outside of my kitchen. That background wasn't real. But making it clean and putting a white border on it helps with the illusion that this could have been made in a studio with a big camera. So all of those little elements are just cheat codes. Because if you zoomed into it and you spend time looking at it, you'd be like, yeah, I can see here where
which
you messed it up.
Interesting enough, we never do, right? Because we live in a world where we're doing things on our phones.
Yes.
But some of us then use the imperfections as the reasons why we actually don't get the stuff done. It's
true.
It's like it's like a weird contradiction, right?
Yes, that's exactly it. Now here's the interesting thing, and I don't admit this often enough. For the longest time, especially on my Instagram, I was trying my best to curate it too much and make it look perfect.
This conversation we've had lots of times, right?
Yes. Because, oh no, I'm an art director, it can't look this way, it's got to look clean, this is what, no, the moment you do that, you then start to procrastinate, you then start to, you lose a lot of steam and a lot of energy because you're not focused on the idea of what this thing is you're trying to put out. Now you're just focused on how it's packaged, and eventually people see through that and they go, we're done with this. Give me something original. Give me an idea. So what I quickly learned in lockdown was quantity if handled well, supersedes quality. People don't really care if that's not what you're trying to sell. If Chanel is putting something out that is shot in the basic room or whatever, and it looks terrible, we're going to say something about it because we expect a lot better from a brand of that nature. If I'm starting a page where I'm just getting you into my life, people actually want to see the nitty-gritty and the realness as much as possible. Like, strip the vanity, bro. If you want us to get to know you and buy into you, show us who you are and what you're about. It was a very, very difficult thing to let go of because of, like, once again, working in agency, you get drilled. Things must be perfect. It must be neat. There must be no loose ends here.
Yeah.
So I had to unlearn that as much as possible, because then I could never get ideas out as freely as possible. I'd spend too much time trying to create the perfect package, so you're thinking about the bow and not necessarily what's inside that thing. Oh, what color is the bow gonna be? Is it satin? Is it rope? Is it this? Is it that? And it just man, that thing blocked me so much. It just hindered so much of my creativity, and it pushed me into a corner. And for the longest time, I thought that I was burnt out. I wasn't burnt out. I think I was just not allowing myself to be free the same way I did when I left advertising and jumped on stage for the first time and just got all of these things out. And that's when we started, and it's so weird to say that the lockdown was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me mentally and creatively.
Yeah.
It really just freed me, and really got me to, I've been pulling out ideas that I've held on to for like 5 or 6 years, bro. Like, I'm taking out all my moleskins and I'm going through stuff I wrote down and never executed on, either because I was too afraid of what people were going to say, or it just didn't feel right based on my aesthetic. Now I'm like, yo, let's go. Like, I've done the work. It's all there. I don't need to come up with any more ideas. I have the ideas. I just need to execute and put them out now,
So on the flip side, because you've been under lockdown, you've been doing this at home, you've been doing it with your wife. Well, now
yes.
your wife, right?
Now my wife, yeah.
How do you need to, or how do you compartmentalize the stuff that is, in inverted commas, work with you as a family? So I'll give the reason why I asked that. So, for example, my wife and I actually can't work. We don't necessarily work well together.
Yes.
And in Sesotho, there's an expression, "Re tseba haholo." We both know too much, right? So
yes.
So the only times we've been able to kind of work on stuff well together is if we know our roles very specifically and there's no overlap. So if there's something that she's dealing with a client and I'm doing the work, I am just the worker. Like, I am I'm not negotiating, so I'm not involved in that. And then we get the best of both of us. But to work on something together, I mean, the way the two of you, because I mean, you're literally working on this stuff together.
Yes, we are.
Would make for a very interesting and, I think, tension-filled space in my home.
Well, let me lay all the cards on the table. It's not an easy thing. And I think it's the same with us. We both know too much, and we both have ideas on how we want to take whatever it is we've come up with. Now, my issue is I'm very OCD when it comes to things. If I'm gonna ask Davina to deliver a line, in my head, this is how the line needs to go. So if I say to her, I just need a little bit more energy, she's like, cool, I'll give you energy. And she gives it to me. Then I'm like, that's cool, but you've just given a little too much. Can you pull it back like 10%?
Because sound like those guys in voiceovers. That's why I don't do voiceovers.
Yes.
Anymore.
I'm that guy.
Add some color with like a sprinkle of salt. It's like a cheap ice.
Yeah, make it purple. Make it purple. and then I can see she gets quite frustrated because she's like, just explain to me what you want here and let's get this thing done, because you're wasting time focusing on something very small. But I go, no, like look at the bigger picture, trust me, when this thing comes together, because we're shooting out of sequence, like if we're shooting a video, we're not shooting in sequence. I have the sequence in my head, she doesn't, so now I'm trying to explain to her and she's getting frustrated because I'm not explaining it properly. So we bump heads quite a bit, but what has been great about it is we've I think it as a take the work and take all the creative stuff away. As a couple and as people, we've learned to understand each other and thresholds. And at what point do you at what point do you go, oh, actually, you know what, I'm kind of drowning this person with all of my ideas here, not allowing them to give any feedback, and vice versa, So we learn to find that interesting balance, and it's a tricky one because like I say, with me being who I am and Davina being who she is, the thing is, she's also a violinist. Yeah. So she's an ultra perfectionist. Yeah. Like if so when we're dealing with things,
it needs an element of dedication to, for example, practice. So
yes,
to do something and repeat it constantly until you perfect it. Which
yes,
so when I was after high school, I spent a year as an exchange student, and my one host family, there was a violin player, and it's the most excruciating instrument to be around when somebody's practicing.
Yes.
Like 30 years later, I still remember what that felt like.
Yeah.
When the wrong note is hit.
Yeah.
But it needs that dedication. It needs that kind of that focus and that dedication to ensuring that you get every single, note
yes. Right. Now, what was amazing is that we also found a way to merge our two worlds. So Davina, we did a couple of skits where I was either trying to learn the violin, or I would challenge her to like play 10 movie intros on the violin while I comment on it, Sorry, my dog's going crazy here. I think when I mentioned violin, he's like, I remember those. Because he'd often sit in on Zoom lessons when Davina was still teaching, and he'd have to listen to the kids practicing. And we found a way to merge that, merge the two worlds, which I think was some of the most interesting content we did, because nobody else could do that kind of thing. None of that stuff was out there at the time, and I think the dynamic of a couple at home trying stuff was also helped a lot. It added to the wholesome nature of it, and it started exposing people to our relationship, because then we started getting campaigns that were very much focused on a duo and, people working together or a couple or whatever it is, which was great. That stuff, without us even thinking about it, we were just two entertainers who weren't going to be on stage for a long time. Cool. Let's join forces and just create something for ourselves. And that worked out. But even today, still very difficult to work together, and it really is all me, because I'm very obsessive and I want things to look a specific way. Like I can obsess over the way this light is just hitting your face here. It's just a touch too bright. Can you just shift, even just like slightly? But I still want, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a gift and a curse, but it's the process that makes me happy, because I have this image in my head. If I break away from what the video is or what the picture is in my head, I'm not going to be happy posting this. It has to look like this, and I have to make it like that before I move on. That's it.
So I suspect the next chapter, the chapter that you're about to jump into, is part of your lesson of let's call it blurring those lines a bit further.
Yes. So we're having a baby, And that's going to be very interesting because there's no time to be sitting and obsessing over things,
Exactly.
for me, when there's a little person here, So if that baby is asleep and you've got a 30-minute window, hey, chief, there's no time here to be looking at let's go, let's get this thing out. But I think that and I'm looking forward to this, to see how I react to these things, because like in hard lockdown, when we made those fashion posters, people were surprised that we could churn them out so quickly. So like the president would speak at 8 o'clock the night before, at 7 or 8 a.m. the next morning, boom, you had something. Because I already know what needs to happen. I already know how this thing is going to look, what color it's going to be, where it's going to sit, what the layout is going to be. I'm already planning it. I think that's just going to be doubled when the baby comes. And I actually need deadlines like this. Because if you don't give me a deadline, and give me, we put blinders or blinkers? Yeah, put blinkers on me. I go in many different directions. So maybe the deadline will be great. You might see even better work coming out at a faster rate. Because, we'll see. We'll see.
It'll be interesting. So, I mean, just in essence, my last question, because we can talk forever, and
I'm also trying to find if there's anything like we haven't touched on.
We often do. There'll definitely be stuff that we haven't touched on, but the beauty of it is that once this is run long enough, there's nothing wrong with people coming back, right?
Absolutely.
One of the things that we should actually look at one of these days or you should look at, is a platform where you talk about your love and your fascination with design.
Yes.
We both have a love, but yours is kind of on a different level. But also, I find a lot of people, a lot of ideas through you, right?
Yeah.
Because you're constantly engaged in that space.
Yes.
There is an audience out there for it.
Yeah.
But so it's more around what it feels like, and kind of listening to you speak, and also just thinking over previous conversations we've had. You've actually reached the point where you are very much in the moment, where you weren't always. Like just thinking about it, and thinking about just, with comedy and your last one-man show, right? Like you're thinking about that, you're working towards it. So you're existing in the future. But literally with lockdown and all the stuff that you've been creating, it really feels like, you just came back from honeymoon, and immediately you come back within 24 hours. There was the videos along the way, and then there's like the summary video, right?
Yeah.
And so everything feels very much, being mindful, being present, being in the now. So I'm curious, what are you thinking about, kind of what the next stage of this is? Or are you still very much in this moment and kind of going, okay, let's see what pans out? Because on top of that, you're having a baby. And one of the things that babies do is they freak you out, and they make you start questioning whether you're ready personally, whether you're ready in terms of the world that you're bringing them into, whether you're ready in terms of the life that you're bringing them into. So,
and I've already started.
Where's your headspace now?
I've already started thinking about those things. I've I guess toyed around with it in my head. This idea of the stuff that we're doing now. Is that going to be sustainable in 5 years' time, for example? Is this going to be able to pay for school fees, down the line? What is the next phase? What do I transition into, et cetera, et cetera? But then I've got to keep reminding myself that I've taken major risks, more than most people would ever, Like, I left a job security, right? Like a secure, like great, not well-paying job. I'll be honest with you. But lots of excellent opportunity to grow, see the world. I mean, I went to the advertising festival in the south of France because of advertising. I've met my heroes that I used to watch on TV because of advertising. And I left that because that wasn't enough for me. I needed something to make me afraid again, make me get up at 4 or 5 a.m. and get to my notebook and write it down. And I try my best now not to give myself a title. So if somebody asks me, what do you do? I don't say I do comedy. I don't say I'm a designer. Because I don't spend enough time doing those kinds of things daily to consider myself just that. Like every day I'm dabbling into something different. I could call myself a mobile photographer if I wanted to, because I'm constantly trying to push that stuff out, I think for me, and I like that you described yourself as a storyteller, because that opens itself up to many different mediums, I think I just like taking things that inspire me and finding a medium to communicate those things to the rest of the world and share those thoughts. That's really what it is, and I guess that's probably why I actually got into comedy, is I wanted the freedom to be able to express my ideas freely without having a creative director, an executive creative director, and a client suppress those and attach it to what their brands are, because then it's no longer my idea, it's not my thoughts, I'm just helping you get your vision out. Comedy gave me the freedom to get my vision out without anybody telling me yes or no. The audience, I guess, decides, and they say yes or no if they like it or not. And right now, I think with a baby coming, what's already starting to happen is I'm already starting to, I guess, cross a lot of things off that I probably shouldn't be spending time on if I'm not going to be using any of this to develop and grow further. What are the things that you actually want to do? What are the things that you actually want to build towards and grow? So my new vision now, and things that will make me afraid, are a short film. So I don't want to say a movie. I'm going to start with a short film. And that's why I've been putting out like vlogs and, more video stuff, to get used to the technical aspect and the visual aspect of storytelling that way. So by the time I throw myself into that world, I feel a little comfortable, that I can tell a story. It's just, what's the interesting angle you're going to take to tell the story? Definitely more photography, and not just photography to post on social media, something a little bit more permanent. So either a book, either a photo journal of sorts where I'm telling a bit of a story, collabs, like with you, for example, because you're such a brilliant writer and you're a poet. Excellent opportunity to join forces and go, hey man, here's this idea, but in order to make it work, like I can write stuff, but I can't write and paint beautiful pictures with words like you do, which is something I struggle with as a creative. Like I really struggle to collab, because I'm quite set in my ways and the way I like to do things, that if I hand something to somebody, it's hard for me just to step all the way back and go, I trust this person will get this thing done. I'm always trying to get involved somehow. And it doesn't matter what your scope of work is. I know just enough about it to know that what you're doing here is not how far I want to take it. So more collabs. And you touched on it earlier on about setting up a platform to, I guess, speak more about design and creativity. In terms of adding a bit of value and hopefully inspiring and motivating people to go out there and just do more. I need to start working on that. I don't know what that is. I've been toying around with the podcast for the longest time. That still hasn't happened because I'm still debating if it is a podcast. Is it a YouTube show? Is it this? Is it that? Yeah, I don't know. And I also don't like to plan too far in advance. It's weird, and I probably should, but I don't like to think about if somebody asks me, what does the next 5 years look like for you? I don't know. You know, I would have never predicted that what I'm doing now and the stuff I'm currently working on, this was never part of the plan. Comedy was never part of the plan. Advertising was never part of the plan. Doing oil paintings was never part of, nothing's ever been part of the plan, If I find it and it excites me and it lights a fire, I go in and I pour more fuel on that fire, That's what I do for however long it takes. And then I move on to the next thing because I'm just curious like that, like most creative people are. You're the same.
So what's weird, I've come the other way, right? So I always knew what life looked like 5 years or 10 years from now, but I never knew what tomorrow looked like, right? And I used to have a cousin who used to give me grief. He's like, you have this major plan, but if I ask you about next week, it's like, dude, I don't know. I haven't thought that close. I always thought far. And over the years, I've gradually gone to the point where it's just like I look at what's in front of me. Like I know I know what my life in 10 years time will look like. Not work, like, because it's not about the work, right? It's just I know what I want to be sitting on a beach somewhere. I want to be writing books. I want to be doing X, Y, Z, and like I know that's what that looks like. But in terms of the things I'm doing and the work I'm doing and how everything fits in, it's like, actually, do you know what? Like right now, I'm doing writing for an insurance company. And that's what's enabling me to ensure that, the family is looked after to a certain extent. And I'm not, people like, yeah, but you've done this and done that. I'm like, yo, man, like, I find everything interesting. So it's cool. Like, I talk to insurance people and I'm like, oh, wow, I never thought about that.
Yes.
And then I write an article and it's like, okay, that's the work that I'm doing in front of me. And then like this podcast is what, 9 years? 9 years ago, I thought, oh, I'd love to start a podcast. And so it's just like looking at what's in front of you, which I've now learned. So like I've gone the other way where I was overly planned and now I literally just kind of go, this looks interesting. I can do this. Let me see where that goes. And then we'll see what happens.
What's the other thing that I want to start not doing? It's weird. This is a weird one to describe. I want to unfollow a lot of creative people. I want to unfollow a lot of accounts that push out creative work because, once again, I always say, the internet really is a gift and a curse. It's wonderful that you can get on and find whatever you're looking for, but that can sway you very quickly and hinder your process. So I need to go back to, and I'll use the painting thing as an example, because I will always say that was the one time where I was in an absolute state of creative flow. When you get up, you start painting, and you realize you haven't eaten for like 6 or 7 hours. You haven't even gone to pee. You just somehow suppress all of that stuff, and you're here because what you're creating this beautiful thing. Like there was an empty canvas. You have all this paper. You've mixed it. You've started formulating whatever it is, and then you're starting to see the progress and go, oh wow, this was nothing 2 hours ago. Now you're starting to see this thing forming. Let me keep going. So I haven't been in a complete state of creative flow for a very long time, and it's only because my creative flow keeps getting disturbed because I keep getting inspired by different things and too many people. When I was studying, my only guy was Guy Bellew. He was my guy. He was the guy who inspired me, who did visual puns with illustration, it was all minimalism. Take out as much as you can, but still make this thing speak as loudly as possible. That's what I do, and that's my style, that's my tone, that's my voice, that's me. I need to stop consuming things now, to focus and really get that stuff out so it comes through. If I do want to do a short film, I want people to go, yeah, that's Donovan Goliath, like through and through. That's him. When I put out a book with whatever pictures up, that's him. That's his style. Once it's all mismatched, I don't want to be that guy who was inspired by 5 different people for whatever project. I really just need to go back and find myself now. and put myself into every single thing that I do. Not that I don't, but I find myself sitting there going, no man, what is my voice? What is my style? What do people know me for? If I had to ask somebody out there, like, what is a Donovan Goliath, whatever, look like? Would they be able to describe it? And am I focusing enough on that, or am I doing what's trendy at the moment?
Yeah, finding voice is an interesting thing. In that, so for example, when I was in the poetry scene, when you perform at that stage, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had everybody listening to the same poet. So a lot of people started to sound a particular way. And what I realized at the time was that the way I speak and my tone and my pronunciations made it hard. It sounded off. So I spent a lot of time listening to myself and finding my voice. With my writing, magazine articles and profiles and that sort of stuff, I found that I don't know what my voice is, but I realized that at some stage people went, oh, I read that and it sounded like it was written by you. So I think the focus, and I think that happened because I focused on just, let's call it, doing the work.
Yes.
I focused on doing the work and being conscious that I wanted to sound like myself, whatever that sounds like. And over time, people then went, oh, that's what that's what you sound like. That's, if you talk about this, that's kind of stuff that you talk about. If I talk about lawnmowers tomorrow, it's like, and then Kojo and lawnmowers, right? But if I talk about, I don't know, figurines, it's like, the guy, it's kind of his.
That's his world.
That's his world. And I guess that's the hard part about this world we're living in, because like you're saying, there's just so many influences. There's so many people doing different things. And sometimes we look to them for the inspiration. But that can take away from our agency. Like you're looking at somebody else, and then when you're constantly being inspired, you're not inspiring. If that makes sense,
That's exactly what it is.
Sometimes you actually just need to step away from, like you're saying, all of that stuff, and just kind of be you and do you, whether it makes sense or it fits or it's on trend or not, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. It's like you're driving on the straight road and you keep setting up off-ramps. Then you're driving, you take an off-ramp, now it's like, oh no, what is this now? I wasn't supposed to be going here. So you come back onto your road again and you set another off-ramp, It's that thing. And man, it can be so demoralizing, because then you start to doubt everything that you do.
Yeah.
Let's use podcasts as an example. Like, you listen to a podcast like Beats One. You listen to whatever, and you're, that's how it needs to be. Now you go and create that, but now you sound just like that person. If you're not doing it better than that person,
then
the
story of my life right now. Like, this act is,
see what I'm saying?
Is constantly pulling myself back and going, do you know what? Just record the stuff, give it to the editor, let it go out.
Yeah.
Like,
it's so difficult. This is also a part of the creative process I don't think we speak about enough. We speak about brainstorming and all of those things, but we never speak about when you sit and go, is this what I want to do, or is it a replica of something I've seen somebody else do, and am I doing it as good as them? That is always such a difficult thing, and that's where the procrastination kicks in immediately, because you go, I can't do it like Jeff Staple does it, because Jeff Staple has the advantage of getting a Kid Cudi on. He's got the advantage of this. He's got Beats on board. He's got this person. Complex is or Hype Beast is pushing it out. Whatever it is, And I'm like, no. Wait. It's not Beats One. What is Jeff Staples one?
I don't know. I know he had.
It's called.
He had his podcast. What was it? He had this hype. Was it hype beast?
The business of hype.
Business of
The
hype.
business of hype. Yes,
Yeah.
that's what it was.
I stopped
Hey.
listening. I got tired after a while. Like it started to. There was a sameness to it. I mean, and this is the interesting. You listen the first time and you're just blown away by the stuff that people are creating, and then you realize that there's 100 of them. And
yes.
Each one has like a great story. And so in a weird way, your story is as valid. Like, okay, they're sitting in Tokyo, or they're sitting in Frankfurt or Berlin or in New York. And it's like within their environment, they're you in your environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I know we need to wrap it up, but I find this is it's a very nice part of this conversation. I was once asked to give my opinion on empathy in advertising. Oof, and I thought about this. I'm like, man, that's such empathy in the advertising industry in South Africa. Like, oof, that's so loaded. But I sat and I thought about it quite a bit, and I dug deep. And one of the things that really stood out for me was we are, what's the word? So many great ideas from young black creatives are being blocked because decision makers are too ignorant and not empathetic enough to just sit down with those people and understand and listen where they're coming from. You know how often, it bothered me so much in agency where I would come up with something, or one of the other black creatives would come up with something, and it kind of gets shut down immediately. You know, where there's like a blank, no, I don't know if it's going to work. And I'm sitting there going, no, this is absolutely going to work. Like, guys, trust me, for the market that we're trying to appeal to, they are going to love this, you know? Like, you don't understand. Like, I mean, I'm not going to give the idea out now because I'm actually trying to make it now on my own and get it out. You know, I used to work on a lot of Metro FM stuff. And, the ideas that got shot down before it even got to client, I would pull my hair out, you know, because I'm sitting there going, man, guys, trust me. I know that people are going to resonate with this idea. And I really thought about it and went, guys, the stories that still need to be told, the stories that we're too afraid to tell, or we think people aren't going to understand. And going back to what you were saying now about whatever stories and whoever you want to speak to, it's so relevant to us. People need to actually hear more of us and not more of who's on Jeff Staple or Pharrell's podcast or whatever it is. Yeah, it's cool to be inspired by those guys, but what's functional here? What are things that people talking about that we do have access to? Who are people that we can actually go to and email or hit up and set up a coffee date or whatever it is and have a conversation with? And I often find that we shy away from that because we don't have this caliber that we think we need to have based off of the things that, we're inspired by. So I think you're doing an amazing thing. To wrap this up, I think you are the perfect person to do this. I'm so glad you started this podcast after so long. I love that it ties in with your book, which I am yet to get signed by you, by the way. And man, more of these. Let's just keep making, man. Let's just keep making. Let's just get all the stuff out.
Thank you very much for coming on. We could talk, and we have done this enough times. Like, we could talk 5 hours and still not run out of stuff. But I think that the idea of empathy is a great note to end on, because I actually write about it in my book in terms of having children. And in terms of, being on social media and being in the media and interacting with the world, where a lot of our problems are because people just, I don't know whether they don't want to or can't understand where somebody else is coming from and their context. And it doesn't take away from, the human being.
Yes.
But on that note, thank you very much, my man.
Thank you, brother.
This is our second or third. I'm already losing count, and we just started. Podcast. Thank you for listening. My guest was Donovan Goliath, also a storyteller. And I will say that I use storyteller now as I found it like a great hold-all for everything, because it's often very hard to determine in a society that that needs boxes and labels. When you exist outside of those, it's always very hard to find a place for yourself, and I use storyteller for that reason. But thank you.
We should call ourselves other. You know, when they list all of those, you're just other.
You know, Pharrell has that what, I am other.
I am other. Kanene. Hey.
And that is something that's also very key for me in terms of my otherness. Like, I learned to accept and take ownership of my otherness, which has taken a long time. So yeah, that's the journey that we're all on, and hopefully the purpose of this podcast is to introduce people to people, ideas, experiences that are other to them, to help them recognizing that in a weird way we are actually all other. Anyway, thank you very much, my man.
Powerful way to end it. Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it.
Cool. And then we'll chat soon.
Aware.
All right.
Bye.
Sure.
Listen to Your Footsteps is a Zebra Culture production. Producer is Nhlangano Chabalala. Music by Baffoe, and the host is myself, Kojo Baffoe.